Welcome everyone to the PJ's Cast. I'm your host Pierce, live from Montreal. I'm joined by my good pal Schmitty for the first time in person, and unfortunately he couldn't be here with us, but we're still able to get him on this. Will Scouch, how's it going, Will?
It's going well. It's been an exciting week. I've been here since Sunday, just finishing up on my work, and it's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
What have you done so far in Montreal?
What have we done so far? Well, we've hung out here quite a while, played quite a few board games, sampled some local restaurants out where we're at in the neighborhood we're in. I went downtown, picked up my media credentials, played around with that for a little while, saw the media room and everything. So it's been an exciting week.
Sounds like it. Yeah, so we just landed here today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to waste no time here. We're going to get right into the draft and ask you some questions here. Rapid fire, I guess. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to go first. I kind of wanted to just start by I went and watched your draft video that you posted. I think it was yesterday or the day before that. Excellent video, by the way.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.
One thing I just noticed through all the scouting videos is just your high praise for Brad Lambert, and I for one agree with that. I see Brad Lambert's upside and his skating ability and everything. I just want to know maybe what do you think scouts see that maybe has made him falling down in some other people's eyes? Because I agree with you. I think he should be a top 10 pick, but from what it sounds like he won't.
So I think there's a few things going on. I think one is it is objectively true that I think in terms of production, he's kind of underwhelmed. Even as a guy who is portrayed as potentially dominant, even in my games where I was seeing him, I didn't really see him very often, sort of grab the game by the reins and just sort of drive the bus that well. But I think another thing is you hear a lot of talk about his hockey IQ or his hockey sense or whatever word you want to use, and I think there's a grain of truth to that. I think there's a maybe a psychological phenomenon where if you think there's some like if you have high expectations of someone and a small part of them kind of doesn't meet those expectations, it can kind of overcorrect in the other direction. I think with him there are issues that are, around processing the game, reading it a step ahead of everybody else and trying to stay ahead of the game and really sort of dictating things as well as he could. But I think a lot of that melts away when you see him back at the junior level and you see him back, when the puck is on his stick. I mean, you see a lot of talent there. So it's just going to be a matter of putting it all together. I think I look at this season as a bit of a write-off. I mean, I think he went from a bad situation to a worse one, which also doesn't really help in a lot of different ways. But I think that's the big thing with him is that there's a lot of little things that come along, and I think people's expectations were quite high and not quite reaching that upside potential this season that he seems to have had. I think people have kind of swung the pendulum in the opposite direction a little bit.
Do you think he goes in the first round still?
Or do you think hope so. I think so. I think there's got to be a team out there who still sees the player that he is. I mean, again, he played very little time this year at the junior level. A guy like Jagr Ferguson got a pretty decent stretch to play junior hockey and sort of show off a little bit. Lambert really didn't get that opportunity. And in the work that I've done over the year, especially before he switched teams, there was a lot of information in there that was really, really positive with him. So I think that if there are teams out there that are interested in that style of player, which I think there are at least some, especially with all the teams that have multiple first-round picks, then there might be some activity to maybe move down or move up or whatever. But I think I'd be surprised if he slipped out of the first round, but I also wouldn't be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what's the highest you could see him going?
Well, I've heard a lot of people all of a sudden talking about him going to Seattle at 4 because the Thunderbirds got his rights. But from what I've heard from people who know more, I think it's that was more like Saskatoon wasn't going to pick him up and they were looking for a better solution, and Seattle picked up the phone and said, yeah, well, sure, like, let's see what we can do. So, I get the feeling that was more of a convenience thing and a coincidence that he went to an NHL market. I mean, if Seattle wanted him, they could probably get him. But I get the feeling that he'll probably go somewhere in the middle of the first round somewhere. I mean, even with all of his issues, I still see him as very, very strong in that sort of large group of players that opens up around 7 or 8. And I see him right at the top of that group. So I could see him in that range for sure.
I forgot that the Thunderbirds picked up his rights because I know he was with the Blades before. Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think he stays another year in Finland, or do you think he comes over to North America and play in the juniors?
I think it really depends on the team that drafts him. I think there's an argument to be made that, you know, if a team like the LA Kings somehow get another first round pick, I believe they traded theirs away. If they somehow manage to land another one, or a team like Carolina manages to land one, or, you know, insert team here. It is, but I mean, like, you know, insert team here that has a first round pick and an AHL team that's young and fast and full of talent and everything. You know, you could put Brad Lambert right there, and maybe that could be a better situation for him. But, you know, sending him to junior, I think, would be a much easier transition. I think it would be sort of punching below his weight class, but I believe he has said himself he wants to play men's hockey next year at some level.
Oh, I'll let you go.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say one last thing to maybe, like, wrap up the Lambert conversation, because I feel like he's such an intriguing prospect. What team in your mind maybe has the system that fits his play style best? Because I know you mentioned that with this year in the Finnish league, that he was playing with a team that wasn't deploying him properly, or at least in a way that would benefit his skill set. So I'm just, like you said, LA, but are there any other teams maybe that maybe would fit that bill as well?
Yeah, I mean, San Jose comes to mind immediately. I think that's an interesting idea. I think if Vancouver, you know, they got a new set of people running the show there, he's right in that range. I'd be surprised if it was Vancouver, but they kind of like these. They seem to want these sort of skilled, speedy guys. You know, but San Jose comes to mind immediately. I mean, 11 might be a bit high compared to what you might expect out of him, but I think they need a guy like Lambert. They've drafted a lot of guys who have a bit of that speed skill combo, but they're all wingers, and so they might need a bit more of that sort of up the middle, something to sort of transport pucks up the middle of the ice on open ice, and I think that could be him. But it's also very hard to tell from this perspective. I mean, not a whole lot of teams use their AHL systems or are they're as full as a team like I'd say Carolina or even like a Vegas comes to mind. But I doubt that he's available where Vegas is picking.
Gotcha. So we're Blackhawks fans, unfortunately. I think you knew that.
Yes, yeah.
So there's a possibility that the Blackhawks could be picking the top 10, even top 5 because of a potential Alex DeBrincat trade. There's also a chance that they don't pick until their first pick, which is their second round pick at 38. So I kind of want to cover both. If the Blackhawks say I know Philadelphia said they don't want to trade their fifth, but like hypothetically, they get their fifth pick or they even get Seattle's fourth pick. Do you pick for positional need, or do you just let the best player fall to you? Because we don't even know who's going to go first overall. So if the old saying that all it takes is one team to one player over another player, that could ring true. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I always will advocate for drafting for best players, right? Like, just draft the good ones. I think when I'm Chicago, you know, there's not a whole lot in the system, right? Like, there's a lot of meh. And I think that with Chicago, you just need more swings, just take bigger hits. And I have my own thoughts about trading Alex DeBrincat at this point in his career, but if you want to get a ton of,
we've both done that. I think at least we're at that point where it's like we think he's going to get traded, so that's kind of where we're at. But I think it'd be best if they kept him and built around him.
Yeah, the accepted stage is okay, I guess. And I imagine they'll get quite a. So I imagine they'll get quite a bit. So I think it's hard to say. I mean, I think they'll do. I mean, look, the thing about need and drafting on need is that it makes no sense. Like, you're not drafting for what your team looks like now. You're trying to build a team that comes down the road. So why would you patch your team's current needs in the draft when those players are 2-3 years away? So, you know, you might skip on a guy for drafting someone you need now, and then in 3 years you're going to need the guy that you skipped on. So, Sam McGilligan's walking up the back porch. He's coming in. He went to Old Navy, but yeah. So I think if I'm Chicago, I mean, I go for best players and just go for upside. And if you are going to get a lot of picks for Alex DeBrincat, then you better hit on those picks, because you could do a lot of damage, but it's a risk.
Oh yeah, I feel like if anyone we've stressed that enough. Even with the Hagel trade, it's like you trade these players, you get these picks, that's fine. At the end of the day, they're all magic beans. You gotta really trust your scouting department on these picks if you're gonna do it.
Well, it's only half of it, right? Drafting the players is the easy part. Turning them into NHLers is the tough one, like good NHLers. So yeah,
it's just the whole process.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious to see. So, at least from what I could gauge from this draft class, the defensemen kind of seem to be like Simon Nemec and Jiricek, and then there's a little bit of a drop off, and then like the next class of defensemen where we have like the Korchinskis and stuff. I'm just curious of who you think is like maybe like the next best defenseman in that class, because I feel like Nemec and Jiricek are kind of in their own tier. So I'm just curious who you think would be the best next defenseman on the board.
Well, it's funny. I have a lot of defensemen in the same group that are some are the regular suspects and some aren't. I'm a huge fan of Seamus Casey and Vladimir Gradinin.
Me too.
It's risky. Like those guys are risky for various reasons, but I think in terms of upside, if you want the highest upside, most unique style of defenseman, I think you're looking at Seamus Casey. But if you're trying to, if you're being reasonable, I like Pavel Mintyukov and what he could be. Kevin Korchinski. I think Kevin Korchinski will get drafted higher than I think he'll be the guy where once a defenseman or two goes off the board, a team jumps at the chance to pick him really quick. He's been playing up until very recently, produced pretty well, really good skilled defenseman, can carry the puck well. There's a lot to like about Kevin Korchinski, but I'm not sold on like a top 10, even a top 15 sort of slot for him. And the rest of them, there's just a lot of question marks. I've got Lane Hudson pretty high, Denton Taychuk a little further back, but if I had my way, if I really wanted a defenseman, not named Jiricek or Nemec, maybe move down a bit, pick up a guy like Casey or Gradinin much later, and swing on a forward. It's just a very questionable group of players in general this year, and defensemen are notoriously difficult to project at this point in their career.
Gotcha. My question to ask is, again, as Blackhawks fans, this is going to be Kyle Davidson's first draft, and the big thing that they've emphasized, and even hearing Luke Richardson's press conferences, they want forwards that can play with pace and skill, particularly at center, and they want big mobile defensemen that can move the puck. Who are some players in your mind that kind of fit that bill?
You were talking, the name that jumped to my mind is a guy like Noah Östlund. That would be, speed, skill, pace guy. They want big guys that can move the puck on back end. Owen Pickering comes to mind. I think there's a universe where Owen Pickering becomes one of the best defensemen out of this draft, just if things really go well, and you might be able to snag him a little later if people are a little sketchy on the likelihood of that happening. But if he hits, he'll hit big. Kevin Korchinski also comes to mind. Chicago will have options. They'll have lots and lots of options. But in terms of forwards as well, like the forwards are where it could be really interesting. Östlund comes to mind, obviously, immediately. We'll see who's available too, because it's always fun. Guys like what they're talking about, especially if they're maybe not the biggest guys in the world, are the ones that slip a little further than they should most of the time. So if Chicago sort of just stays calm and relaxes and lets the draft happen around them, and they sort of capitalize on what's left, then I think they could do pretty well.
And kind of still on that topic, like, what did you think about the Blackhawks 2021 draft? Because I think I've been a huge vocal critic of it. I think they went for...
It was bad.
Yeah.
You said it perfectly. It was very bad.
Yeah,
it wasn't good.
Yeah, I could have just summed it up like that. But it just feels like last year that they went for players that you could find in free agency, like Nolan Allen. Like, I hope he turns out to be something special, but it's just, I don't know. Like, I feel like those kind of defensemen you can easily find in like free. Yeah, like even if you want to drop those defensemen, you can find them later or just go to free agency and sign them. And I just think of guys that they left off the board again, like Logan Stankoven, like even Atu Raju and all those guys. Like, there's definitely some forwards that they could have gotten, and that kind of I always think of Logan Stankoven, and the player I kind of see this year that could be Logan Stankoven is Jagr Ferguson. I wonder if you kind of hear that sentiment where he put up amazing offensive production in the WHL, but of course he's not the tallest guy. Like, he's like 5'10" and 150 pounds or whatever, and he's not necessarily like a burner of a skater. And I think those are two things that could really potentially make him drop out of the first round. So could you see Jagr Ferguson potentially being there at number 38 for the Blackhawks if they do stay there?
I'd say it's possible, but unlikely. I get the feeling that the kind of word is out on him. I think with Stankoven, I don't know. I can see why people would be a little skittish of him. He's really small. Like, Fergus is light and small, but Stankoven is really small. And, there's that, like, threshold, I feel like, where if you're below that 5'10", you're in tough to go high. And I think Fergus still kind of breaks that threshold and might still do pretty well for himself. I don't know. If he's there at 38, he's a phenomenal pick. I think it would be a no-brainer. But I think that might be a little on the list. I feel like a team will be willing to take the risk that he'll fill out and get stronger and get better over time in the gym and everything. And it's possible.
And it's just funny, like, with size, you always bring up often in your videos, it's like, this is the difference between you, like, getting drafted in the first round or potentially going in the second round. It's so stupid. I don't understand it. But
two inches is not that much in the grand scheme of things.
So I want to. So, like, Bob McKenzie's rankings came out, and we've seen a lot of other rankings come out from, like, prominent people who do scouting, like Chris Peters and Corey Prom and Scott Wheeler and all that stuff. And I'm just wondering, what are some players that you're higher on than, like, more than the public consensus is, and what are some players that you're lower on than the public consensus?
Where do we start? I mean, I'm really high on Seamus Casey. Like, his average rank is outside the first round now. I've got him in my top 15. Vladimir Gradinin as well, ranked in the middle second round on average, middle of my first round. Gleb Trikazov, fringe first round pick, I'd say, based on my ranking tracking, and I've got him in my top 10. I mean, there's a lot. Philip Machar in the mid to late 20s, I've got him early, I think he's at 13. I'm just looking now. And Brad Lambert is the other one that I'm also very, very high on. On the other direction, I mean, people are talking about Cutter Gauthier a lot. It's like a top 5 pick. I've really struggled to see it with him. I don't know. I have time for the idea of what could he be in 5 years or so, but I don't buy that he'll likely hit that point while everyone else is also getting better. So I don't know. Like, I feel like it's going to be like a Barrett Hayton type situation where, if he was a mid first round pick, you bring him along slowly and you take your time with him, and the expectations are relatively low. But no, he was a top 5 pick and probably shouldn't have been. Everybody started talking about him as, maybe this is the guy that Arizona knew something about that no one else did, and maybe there's something here, and they push him in the NHL pretty quick. And like with Cutter Gauthier, I can see that kind of a storyline brewing where it's like, okay, I see where people are coming from, but just by the mechanics of how this works out and who they're not drafting, to me, it almost says more about your draft pick based on who you don't draft rather than who you do draft, right? Like, if you have the chance at player XYZ and you take player F, and player F is just not going to work out, I think that says a lot more rather than drafting someone later on and saying, let's take a chance and having it maybe not work out. But I don't know. He's the main one that I have a lot lower. And I mean, I didn't really notice why he all of a sudden was shooting up boards at the end of the year. I think I had him in a relatively reasonable range, and then everyone started to move him up a lot, and I just didn't hop on that bus. I mean, I'm also a bit more skittish on Danila Yurov, but only just. Like, I just feel like his overall package and upside is a little bit more limited, but I can't say it's impossible that he becomes a pretty good pick out of the first round this year. Obviously Rush is a bit of a wild card, but I order my list based on as if everything were equal. I'm assuming that if I were talking to these players, they were born anywhere else in the world where anything could go and things were basically normal. So I don't really think about the whole Russia thing a whole lot, but those are some guys that I think I have quite a bit higher or lower than the rest of the world.
I was going to say, Cutter Gauthier seems like the perfect guy who's going to go to either Philly or Ottawa, and their fan base is going to get super teed when they don't trade for a top 6 forward to get back out. He's probably
Yeah.
My thing with Cutter Gauthier is just he uses his size way too much at his level, and that's not going to cut him at the NFL. Like, you're not going to be able to like, you know who else does that a lot? I don't know if you've seen this before, but Adam Fantilli does that a lot with his size too, where he just thinks like, I'm like 6'4", I can just walk all over.
I can bully all these guys.
You're not going to do that in the NHL. So,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know, that's what I saw on it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I had this question, I guess, is just a little more broad, but like the last 5 years or so, there's always been like one goalie that might be a first round talent. like you had like as far back as like you got like Spencer Knight, Askarov, you got Wallstedt and Kosa.
And there was Ottinger in 2017.
Ottinger in 2017. I'm just curious maybe who you think might be the first goalie taken off the board this year and where you think that might be. Because it doesn't sound like it's a strong goalie.
Tyler Brennan maybe goes first. Topias Leinonen maybe. But they're guys, they're guys. I don't have huge expectations for many goalies in this year's draft. I try to pull whatever data I can on goalies that interest me for one reason or another. So just stop honking.
Apparently, there's a lot of the bumper to bumper traffic here in Montreal right now.
Supposedly, so they say. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Tyler Brennan might be one. Reed Dick, just because he was at the U18s and like stopped a ton of pucks, might be a guy that a team jumps on pretty early. But I don't know. I usually 9 times out of 10, my attitude with goaltending is don't touch them until way later and draft guys that usually save a lot of pucks and just cross your fingers and hope they work out. And like this year there aren't that many guys like that. Yeah, and there's not that many like that this year, even in Europe and such. So there's some goalies that I would like to see drafted, but I wouldn't like go out of my way to add them this season.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's kind of what I gained as well. I just, maybe there was a name out there, but I guess that makes up for the year before, because the year before they had Wallstedt.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty rare. That the last 2 years for goaltending has been pretty rare, and I don't think we're going to see. I mean, Jesper Wallstedt is the first one in I think in history who's ever played that many games as a draft eligible in that league. So, I get the feeling that was a bit of an outlier. We'll see what happens, but yeah, this year is not last year.
So I feel like, I don't know, do you have anything else to add? Because I feel like we touched on everything. We talked on some of the forwards, some that could fall. We talked about the defensemen, what's kind of that tier underneath Nemec and Jiricek, and then we talked about the goalies. Not that there's really much quality there, but
I was gonna say, just maybe for the last question, what would be your prediction for the biggest surprise tomorrow, potentially? In the first round?
And why is it Ottawa?
I know. It's funny. I'm staying with some other people from the community online, and we love just
Mm-hmm.
bouncing these ideas off of each other. Just being like, what if this happens? Because every single year you think you have the right one. You think you're like, oh man, it would be insane if this happened, or it would be crazy if this happened. And then something completely out of left field that's even crazier happens. I don't even know. I never in a million years would have thought Yegor Chinnikov would have been a first round pick. Never in a million years would have thought Tyler Boucher first round pick. Never in a million years. Hell, Nolan Allen. I didn't think Nolan Allen would have been a second round pick.
Okay. All right. That's the last pick of the first round.
Thank you, everyone, for joining the PJ's cast.
Yeah. This is the last time I'll be on this show. Thank you very much for having me. This is my song. This is my bird song. As the ship sinks. This is it. But yeah.
I want a good laugh. We live streamed the draft last year, and there's just a live reaction.
We heard we heard WHL. I was like, because I thought it was gonna be Logan Stankoven, and I wanted him so bad. And then I heard Prince Albert Raiders Nolan Allen. I'm like, I never really heard of him, Nolan Allen.
I mean, they're trying to trade Alex DeBrincat, so maybe they're going, oh well, it didn't work for him, so why draft another 5'7" guy, right? But anyway. I forget what the original question was, to be honest with you.
I just like what you think the biggest surprise would be tomorrow.
Yes. I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like Nathan Gaucher go really high. Stop honking.
They don't like Nathan Gaucher, apparently.
No, they don't.
Even though he's from Quebec.
God,
I think he is. Anyway, I think he plays a style of play that a lot of teams would really, really like. He's an up and down guy, good straight line skater. I think he's one of these guys where he's definitely not. You point at him and look at his biometrics. You don't look at his height and his everything and go, oh, he must suck because he's big. I don't think that's true. I think he's just a very simple player to evaluate and sort of a pretty basic one to project as some kind of NHL player, a guy like William Carrier, kind of. I know Carrier had a really successful junior career, and Gaucher kind of hasn't really. But I look at them and sort of see, okay, if I'm coaching these guys, I go, okay, your job is to go out there and wreck everyone's business and, get along the boards, free up the puck, and get it out in front of the net. And Gaucher does that really, really well. It's just how much does the team value that potential and say, well, what if we make him better? What if we round out his game? What if we get him more skilled and whatever? Or stronger and bigger, and maybe that slows him down a little bit, but who knows? You might end up with a really good power forward. But, I mean, he's a player that I would not be shocked to see drafted way, way higher. But I also feel like I'm not being crazy enough because it's reasonable he could be a late first-round pick. And if he goes top 12 or 13 or whatever, I'd go, that's a little nutty, but okay. So, I mean, like Maverick Lamoureux at like 15 would probably just explode my mind or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen, but those are famous last words. So one of those guys, a big, always look for big, heavy physical guys to go way higher. Reed Schaefer is another one where I feel like that could be an option that goes way higher than you would expect. So I'm expecting a ton of surprises, a ton of insanity, because there's always insanity, and every year it feels like there's even more.
So Reed Schaefer to Ottawa at 7. Got it.
You know what? You might chuckle, but you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know.
And that's another thing. Like, this is the first time since 2019 in Vancouver that we're having like a draft in person. It's gonna be so much fun.
It's gonna be really interesting.
Booing Gary Bettman, hearing him
Hopefully doesn't have COVID this time.
Yeah.
I won't be booing him. I'm in the press box on Thursday, so it might be a little bit taboo for me to sit up there and boo him. But have at her, go.
I was saying
exercise your rights.
Yeah, he's a second round prospect.
I'm wooing him. I'm countering the boos with woos. I shouldn't slap Gary Bettman too bad. He's fine. He does his job, but he takes the licks. He gets the licks. There's no way to avoid it. So it'll be fun to witness it in person, and I'll be looking forward to hearing you guys from the other side of the arena.
Oh yeah.
You'll just hear the Blackhawks trade up, and you'll just hear two people go,
yeah.
What?
Yeah. Get out the bullhorn. Yeah.
Oh, what's your hot take for the draft?
My hot take. Well, let's say a goalie goes in the first round. Let's throw an NHL team out there. I don't know who, but somewhere late in the first round. I wonder if someone will throw a pick at a goalie. I don't know who, but it's hot enough to just say a goalie in the first round in 2022. So stick with that.
I respect that. Anyways, well, thanks for coming on. It sucks we couldn't do this in person, but you know what? I just remembered that it's been exactly a year since we had you on our show the first time, so it's kind of crazy how this worked out. And then tomorrow, like, I'm pretty sure it was like a year since Montreal was in the Stanley Cup final, and then they're gonna be picking first overall in Montreal. So it's weird how things change in a year.
Yeah, we're growing up together, guys. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thanks for coming on.
Sorry I couldn't come.
Oh, it's all good.
Next year's draft, we'll go wherever it is and do it again.
I wonder where it'll be next year.
I think they'll announce it. I think they're announcing it at the event this year. I think. I could be wrong, but I feel like that's what they did.
Hopefully it's somewhere cool. Let's
go and hold it in Arizona in their college stadium.
Yeah. Hey, I'd love to go to Arizona.
Dude, the college stadium would be hilarious.
Yeah. I'd love to go to Arizona. It'd be sweet. You probably wouldn't do it at the college stadium, but they'd probably find some other venue to do it at. Yeah. Arizona's cool.
They tell the city they can actually sell that many tickets for once.
Yeah, exactly. It might be fun. So we'll see.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. I know you got places to be. It means a lot that you took the time out of your schedule, even though it couldn't be in person. But hopefully we'll bump into you at the draft.
Yeah. Yeah, if you see me, say hi. I'll be wearing this shirt probably, and a little bit more dressed up, but we'll see each other. Yeah, all right. We'll see you around, guys. It was a pleasure.